Hi, everybody. So today we're going to look at the perspective tool. So what I did was I created a file, and you'll notice that here's my actual file in the center, the white area, and outside of it, this would be considered like my desktop. So these are images that I've created outside of my actual file, and I have them there ready to go so that as I continue to work, you'll kind of understand how I like to work with the perspective tool and a little bit about how the perspective tool works. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a building, and I've got two sides of the building I created right here. And then I have some area here that I'm kind of working on windows. So if I zoom in on those, let's kind of zoom in, grab my zoom tool. You can see that I have a border on these windows, and the stroke isn't very large. So I'm going to actually increase the size of that stroke so you can see it a little better. So let me click off. So there you can see there's the stroke. And what I want to do is I want to make it look like the windows are lit. So I'm going to take this object, arrange it to the front, and I'm just going to drop it right over the top. So it'll look like there's a shade coming down. And notice that I made these all the exact same width. And let's do that to the next one. So I'm just going to arrange that to the front and bring it over. And so the dark area on the building will look like a shade coming down. So I'm just going to kind of get through this. You'll see as I move through, it'll make a little bit more sense. Oops, I want to make sure that one's on top. Get into front. And there we go. So there are my three different window styles. And what I want to do before I go any further is I'm going to group these. So Command G, and the same. I'm going to group them individually, Command G, and then Command G. So let's zoom out for a minute. And there's my three windows. And so now what I want to do is I want to align them. So I'm going to, you'll notice that I get, oh, it looks like one of my windows is a little longer than the other. Let me just make sure I have that up all the way. There we go. So I want to kind of align them together. And I have it in isolation mode. So all I have to do is click on my desktop and it'll take it out of isolation mode. And there's my next one. And notice how it shows me the space in between. So there I kind of have them aligned. So now I'm going to, and another way to do that, and I'll show you that in a second, is I'm going to copy the three of these, Command C, and then make a second set, Command V. And if I bring that set over here, I can see that it's trying to line up. It's my smart guides, but I have sort of a big space over here. So if I want those to be equal, there's a toolbar called Align, and it's right in here. Fast key is Shift F7, or I can see it in my Properties panel. And what it does is it allows me to, and I'm going to click on the More. So there's my whole Align keys. And there I can see I can align them on a grid this way. I also can align them, next to each other. So I just want to show you how some of these work. So if I grab all of these, all of them, just click off, grab them all, and then try to align them, different things are going to happen. So if I want to align them like to the top, now they're perfectly aligned there. But what if I want to align their distance apart? So see what happened? Now they actually moved, and I can see that they are exactly the same distance apart. So I just use the distributing spacing part of the alignment. So here's my align objects, my distribute objects, and my distribute spacing. So now let's say I want to make another row of these windows. So I'll just copy this one, Command C, and add another row, Command V, and I'm going to line them up. And now I kind of have some variation going on. So maybe I want to move some of these around so they're not exactly And again, as long as I get this couple of lines together, I know they're all going to be. So now they're not exactly the same. And let's go ahead and copy another row. Command C, Command V. Now I've got another row. And on this one, I'm going to line that up. And now notice that the top and the bottom rows have the same space in between. And on this one, I'm just going to take the whole object, transform, and reflect it. So now instead of a short window, a short shade, I have a longer one, and then I have some variation again happening. So it's all about like trying to find some variation. I'll bring that one I just copied again. I'll go Command V, and I'll bring that one in. And now I have kind of a nice set of windows, right? So let's zoom out a little bit. And I want to take those windows and I want to group them, Command G, and I want to make them smaller. So I'm going to hold my Shift key and I'm going to drag them up and make them so there would be a small set of windows. And now I can make multiples of that. So I would go Command C, Command V, and now I've made several sets of windows. And I may use all these windows, I may not. But at this point, I'm just making some extra sets, just so I have them. Okay, so there they are. And I think I might want to make them all just a little bit smaller again. I'm not going to group this set. I just want to make them a little bit smaller. And maybe even a little smaller than that, because obviously my file sizes, I can change it forever and ever. I can make it bigger and smaller. So I'm going to just set those off to the side. Actually, I'm going to probably put everything on top because you'll see why in a second. I also made a sign over here, and if we want to zoom into that, I just kind of made this sign, and I think I want to size it so that it sort of fits the width of the building. So I'm going to just make it a little smaller. And I just typed a word just with my type tool to put into the sign. So there it is. And I'm just going to drag it up and put it into my sign and then kind of position it, and I'll group those together. Command G. So there I have it. There's my two sides of my building, and I have my windows and so forth. Now, one thing I want to check on these windows is it seems to me, and I just want to make sure that my stroke has not scaled. So I'm going to need to do something about that. And that means that I need to look at the stroke on every one of these and make sure it's correct. So if I look at the stroke on all of these, I have to see what it says. Now it tells me it's 3 points, but I've made the windows really small, right? So that tells me that my preferences are not scaling my strokes. So I need to revisit that. I'm going to make these strokes smaller, and then I'm going to set my preferences to scale. So let's take a look at that. It's pretty good. And what I want to do is go into Illustrator, go to Preferences, and then go to General. And over here is Scale, Strokes, and Effects. And this is really important when you're making stuff bigger and then making it smaller. You always, always, always want to have this on. So we're going to say OK. And now if I make these bigger, the strokes will kind of follow suit to the size, and I won't have it all shrunk up and no space between the windows. All right. So, and I reset it every time, but every time they do an update, they have it as a default to not be clicked. So that's definitely something you want to change and fix. So now the other thing is I have this font here, and I'm just using probably the default, which is Myriad Pro. So if I want to come in here and change it, I can change it. There, I did. So I made it kind of a crazy font. And it still should be grouped. So when I click it, I should get the whole thing. Let's see. Nope, it's not. So let me just double check and make sure it's grouped. So I'm going to go to Object. Oh, see, it says Ungroup. So, well, that's because I'm in isolation mode. So now if I click it, I get the whole thing. All right. So whenever you're in isolation mode, you're only going to get the area that you clicked on. And you always want to click off onto your desktop to make sure that you have what you need. All right, let's get to the tool, the exciting part. So let's zoom out. There's all our stuff that we built, and this is our artboard right here. Notice that I have the artboard horizontal. I always suggest you use horizontal when using the artboard, just because it really makes a difference in terms of just how you're working with the tool. You can use vertical, but I find horizontal to be much easier. So now the next thing I want to do is I want to go down to my let's see here. I'm going to go to my perspective tool, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click on it. So the perspective tool and grid, the grid tool is on the right side of your, if you have it doubled like I do, it's on the right side, and it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, ninth one down. It sort of looks like a grid with an L. And notice that there's little tools next to it. So now I can see my perspective grid, and this is the default grid. And so the way that this grid works is that there's this little icon up at the top, and this icon will allow you to move the grid around and get to different grids. So notice that right now it is on blue, and if I click here, it will go to orange. And if I click on the bottom, it will go to the ground level, which is green. So the blue level, the fast key for that is 1. The orange is 2, or I mean, the green is 2, and the orange is 3. It should be 3. There we go. So there you can see how it changed. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to be able to move my tool. And to do that, I need to be on the perspective selection tool. So just like, remember how the gradient mesh had its own selection tool? See the word selection here? And notice that you've got the white arrow. So that is my selection tool. So if I try, let's say I try to bring my regular selection tool and drag this in, nothing happens. Okay, so let's bring it back. But if I go into my grid tool and click on this tool, which is my perspective selection tool, say that 10 times fast. Now if I bring it in, notice that I'm able to get my perspective. Now notice I can actually move it around. So I can still change its size a little bit, which is kind of cool. So if I want it to be a little wider of a building, I can do that. But notice that it only went on the orange grid. So if I go over to my blue grid and click on the other part, which I had made, and it's not going to be the same size anymore, because why? Because I changed it in the grid. I can match it up, and there I have part of my building on the grid. So then let's say I want to bring in some windows. So let's go ahead and bring in these windows, and I'm just going to bring them in right over here. And I could make them smaller and make them double rowed or however, but I'll just sort of center them. And then let's go ahead and grab this set. And this is why I didn't group them all. I only kind of grouped them individually. Oh, I don't want that. So Command Z, I want to be on my orange grid. So let's make sure I'm on my orange grid. I'm going to line them up to the other side. And there we go. So now I've got images on both sides. And let's say on this side, I'm going to have one more set. And I'm going to bring them down just a little bit. And let's say that's going to be the front of my building, or the side of my building. And then don't forget, I've got my great little sign here. So let's go ahead and put that up. So I'm going to bring my sign down on my blue side, which might be the front of my building, and click on it, and there it is. Now if I want to kind of push it back a little bit, make it smaller, look here that it's smaller, I can decrease the size. So if I hold my shift key, Command C, I should be able to, there we go. So there it is. There's my, and I might want to bring it down just a little bit. So I'll use my, oops, too much arrow keys. Let's get right in there. So just really quickly, I was able to kind of pull together what would be a building. Now, I want to make a door for this building, so I'm going to do that outside of the grid. So I'm going to click off of the grid. I'm going to click off of my perspective selection tool, and I'm going to create a door. So let's just zoom into an area over here by the windows, and let's go ahead and make ourselves a door. So I'll grab my, oh, what's going on? I'm still in the grid. Command Z. So I need to get off of my perspective selection tool and now try and build something. Oh, wow, it's still doing it. This is why most of the time what I do when I'm working with this tool is I try to build everything ahead of time. The other thing that you can do is you can go into window and we should be able to get into our grids to turn our grid off. So if I go into view rather, and I go to grids, show grids, perspective grid, there it is. I can hide grid. I can uncheck snap to grid. And so I want to uncheck that right now. Let me go back into view and go back to my perspective grid and say hide grid, right? So I can kind of turn that all off. Now let me try to make my, and now because I've done that, I've turned off my snap to grid and I've turned off my, and I've hidden my grid, I can now start to build my door. So you can see where it's a little confusing, and that's one of the reasons why I tend to like to build everything ahead of time and kind of know where it's going to go. So I'm just going to make kind of a gray looking door. I'll put a border on that, like a wooden border. And I'll make that a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to copy it, Command C, Command V, and bring in the other side of my door. I'll make kind of like industrial looking doors. And then I'm going to make a little doorknob. So I'm going to use my rounded selection tool. I'm a rounded shape tool. And I will make that a little bit smaller. And I'm going to reverse these by clicking that double-sided arrow right here. And then I'm going to copy it, Command C, Command V. And I'm just going to bring them together and group them, Command G. And let's bring those over to the door. There we go. And so now I've got some little plates for my door. And then the other thing, I think I want to change the color of the stroke that I have on these. So I'm just going to change that slightly, make that a little darker. There we go. So there's my little door, and now I'm going to make the doorknobs, and I will go to the ellipse tool. I'll make a circle, hold shift, and just make a circle. And this time I'm probably going to get rid of my stroke. Actually, I'm going to flip that and get rid of my stroke. And at this point, I mean, I could put a little gradient mesh on there if I wanted and make it look shiny or however, but I'm not going to go to all that right now. And I'm just going to go ahead and actually, I do want to put a little something on there. So I'm just going to make one more little shape, and I'm going to make that white, whitish gray, and drag it over. Maybe a little too big. There we go. Now I'll make another one. Command C, Command V, and I'll reflect that one. Object, arrange, or transform, reflect, and say OK. And now I'll drag these guys up into the doorknob. Whoops, didn't group it. And group that one up. Here's my little door. And I don't think that those are aligned. Maybe they are. Let's bring it down. Oh, too much. Okay, so there, oh, didn't bring my. So let's go ahead and zoom out and let's group the whole thing. So I've made some doors, Command G, grouped. Let's zoom all the way out, Command 0, and let's zoom out a little more and grab those doors. But first, what do we have to do? We have to go back into view. We have to go back to our perspective grid and show grid. And then we also want to go to snap to grid. And we're going to put it on the blue side. So we're good. And we're going to get our perspective selection tool. And we're going to grab these doors and we're just going to put them in. And maybe make them just a little bit bigger. There we are. So there's our building. And so now if I want to use this building somewhere else, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of show you how I would accomplish that. So I'm going to go back to show perspective grid, and I'm going to hide my grid again. And this time I'm going to grab my entire building, all right? And Command C, I'm going to make a new file, and I want it to be horizontal this time, and I'll just say, you know, city street, and go ahead and say create, and Command V. There's my building, and now notice that it is completely movable. So if I want it to be, you know, kind of smaller, I can put it kind of over here. Let me bring in another one, Command V, and I'll put that one kind of in front of it. And Command V, put another one there, and kind of have that one off screen a little bit. And then let's say I want to change the color of this. I'm going to go back over here and make this one more gray. And grab the color on the other side and make it more gray. Give it a little shadow maybe. So there you can see I'm starting to reinvent my whole side of my building. And I could, you know, take these words, and if I double click on them, one of the things that happens, just so you know, is that these are no longer type, Command C. They are now shapes. So I would have to delete these shapes out or put these signs on, you know, at a different time or that kind of thing, or not put a sign on. But it kind of gives you a good idea. So in no time at all, I was able to kind of build a little city street and make it look Command 0. Pretty believable. And I still have my original file over here, which I can alter at any point. So if I go into my selection tool, my perspective selection tool right here, and I click onto this, I can drag it off and delete it and start over. So a great tool. I want to also show you, I'm going to create another new file and just open up the perspective grid to kind of show you some of the things you can do here. So if I go back to view and I go back to perspective grid and say show grid, I can move things around. So if I want this perspective to be different, I can drag this to, you know, a different place. So here I can bring my orange in and make the building longer. I could do different things. And what's nice though is that Illustrator already has some stuff set up for you. So if you go into perspective grid, you'll notice that there's 1 point. So I can go normal view. So I can say 1 point and click, and notice that it shows me 1 point perspective. So let's say if you want to have a long street and you just want to build that street, this would be a great way to start that. So you could build your black box, bring it in, put your white, like a checkered line, and bring that in, and you'd immediately have a long street. And then you could bring that into another file. Let's say I want to do 2-point perspective. So 1-point perspective is this one vanishing point right back here. Let's say I want to do 2-point perspective. So here is let me make sure I'm on it. So when you go to perspective, you go to 2-point, and you have to go over to 2-point perspective. And there you can see the one we were working with, which is usually the default. And that's this particular one. I can change the ground level of it, make it look almost like I'm looking up, kind of some interesting perspectives. And notice also when we looked at that one that there was another one here. So I can actually set my perspective by changing all my perspective points, like these guys. I can change those, and then I can give it I can save it as a preset, just like you can save a brush. So I'm going to click that and show you. Here's one that I built for a different reason, and there it is, and it's saved right in my Illustrator file, and it's saved from many times ago, so it remembers it. And then you have 3-point perspective. Let me just get to that one. Perspective grid, 3-point perspective, and then move over. And there we can see the top of the building. So there's like Superman kind of stuff flying off, whatever. You want to look down. That's a great perspective. And then also there was another one that I had saved in there. And I don't even know what I have in there. So there it is. So there I kind of created a more unusual, like kind of angled it in and did some kind of interesting stuff. So that's pretty much it. That's Perspective Grid. I really encourage you to play around with it. Remember, you have to be on your Perspective Grid tool. I always suggest that you build things ahead of time. But overall, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful tool to use.